19 years of night shifts have trained me to measure the dark in heartbeats and ventilator size. Every evening begins the same. I step from the elevator into the top floor ICU and feel the air change. Cooler, dry from ancient ducts, tinged with disinfectant, and the faint metallic bite of old oxygen lines. The hallway hums with low fluorescent light, one bulb always flickering above bed 4. Beyond that light stretches my small dominion. 8 rooms, half shuttered now that the county cut funding, each containing more machinery than patient. I move by ritual. Before clocking in, I refill the pen in my leather shift log, the one I've kept since 2006. Every night it receives a new page. Pulse pressures, odd rhythms, floor maps sketched with quick strokes. At 02:15 sharp, I drink the same burnt coffee from the staff lounge, because routine steadies the mind when lives can change in seconds. An older nurse once told me, "The dead can trick you if you stop looking." So I never leave a room without one last glance at the monitor. Over the years, I've been the calm center of countless codes. Ventricular fibrillation. Follow ACLS, advanced cardiac life support. Like scripture, shock, compress, medicate. When a patient crashes at 3 in the morning and the residents' hands shake, I anchor them. Machines fail, batteries die, but protocol saves. Science saves. The hospital itself fights back sometimes. Built in the 1950s, its bones creak with every wind gust. Paint curls from steam pipes. Linoleum yawns open at the seams. One elevator refuses to reach this floor after midnight. No one bothers to fix it. The skeleton night crew, me, one float nurse, a single respiratory therapist, and whatever resident drew short straw, keeps the place alive enough until dawn. Security is a rumor. I have long believed death is electricity shutting down, chemistry unraveling. Nothing mystical lingers. Even the oddest cases, sudden awakenings, strange heart rhythms, always resolve into data once you chase the error far enough. That faith has carried me through 19 years of beep and silence. But the night I'm about to tell you about broke that faith. It began with a trauma page and the squeal of gurney wheels echoing up the empty hall. A mid-40s man, unknown, coming in after a car wreck, vitals stable, unconscious. Just another admission. Or so I thought as I snapped my gloves on and prepared the monitor leads. I had no way of knowing that by sunrise, nothing I believed about life, or saving it, would survive. The trauma team pushed the gurney through our doors at 23:41, plastic wheels stuttering on the cracked linoleum like a metronome slightly out of time. The man was mid-40s, seatbelt bruising along the clavicle, glass dust glittering in his hair. He breathed on his own, shallow, regular, his chest moving like a tide barely strong enough to turn a seashell. His chart read John Doe, found unresponsive after a single-car rollover, blood alcohol pending, pupils equal sluggish, no obvious fractures. I rolled him into bed too and did what 19 years of nights has taught me to do without thinking. Attached the ECG leads, clipped the pulse oximeter to his finger, cuffed his arm for non-invasive blood pressure. I always explain this to new families. ECG means electrocardiogram, stickers that read the heart's electricity, the way a microphone reads a voice. Pulse ox is a simple red light that estimates how much oxygen is in the blood. Blood pressure cuffs squeeze and listen for the thrum in the artery. Together, they tell us if a body is moving blood and oxygen where it matters. The monitor woke with its usual green and amber lines. A tidy sinus rhythm stepped across the screen. P, QRS, T, like a footfall, a heel to toe that meant the conduction system was intact. His oxygen saturation read 96. Blood pressure, 122/74. Ordinary numbers. My mind cataloged them and relaxed by one click. Stable for now, I said, mostly to the room. He made a small sound then, a dry hinge of a sound. Not a word, a shift in his throat. I was bending to check the airway when his eyelids fluttered open. The rhythm vanished. A single long, paddle-flat line replaced the measured steps on the ECG. A systole, the computer declared, which is a sterile word for no electrical activity at all. The difference between a house gone dark because someone flipped a switch and a house gone dark because the wiring never existed. His blood pressure numbers blinked, then zeroed. The pulse ox read, like it had given up asking the question. Leads, I said, already checking them. Gel adhesion fine, cables intact. I pressed fingers to his neck. No carotid pulse. The place where life usually announces itself felt like a cold, faithful pocket. But his eyes, now fully open, tracked my hand. People imagine flatline as cinematic. It's not. It's quiet. It's the absence of a wave that should always be there, like the ocean forgetting how to rise. A body cannot open its eyes with a heart that is not moving blood. The brain, greedy for oxygen, fails in seconds. This was impossible in the way a square circle is impossible, not just unlikely, but forbidden by the rules. Artifact, the float nurse said, meaning a bad signal. That is the first thought any trained clinician must have, the same way an electrician checks the outlet before tearing down the house. I did my part, swapped the ECG cables for a fresh set, reapplied new leads, tightened the cuff, moved the pulse oximeter to the opposite hand. The monitor did not change. Line 0. Dashes. The man's mouth opened, closed. His lips shaped air without catching it into sound, like a fish waking on a dock. He focused on me with terrible clarity, as if focusing were the only muscle left that still obeyed. Dr. Ethan Mora arrived. Fresh scrubs, fatigue knotted under his eyes in that first-year way. "What am I looking at?" he said. "Normal when unconscious," I answered. "Flatline when awake." Hearing it out loud made the sentence feel obscene. He rubbed a glove across his jaw. "Glitch. It has to be." He leaned over the bed, tapped the monitor as if it were a stubborn vending machine. "Let's get an ABG and an echo. If the heart's beating, the echo will show it. If it's not, the ABG will tell us what the tissues are seeing. For the benefit of any listener who has not lived in rooms like this, ABG is arterial blood gas, a test that measures oxygen and carbon dioxide directly from an artery. The way testing water at the faucet tells you more than listening to the pipes. Echo is echocardiogram, ultrasound of the heart, sound waves painting a live picture of the muscles squeeze. I place the arterial line in his radial artery, a thin catheter that gives us beat-to-beat blood pressure, a continuous, direct reading instead of the cuff's occasional squeeze. The waveform should rise and fall with each heartbeat, a tidy picket fence. On the screen, nothing, a flat baseline like a horizon drawn by a bored student. He blinked. He followed the catheter with his eyes. I felt the soft drag of his skin under the tape as if the body were normal and alive and only pretending not to be. "Pain response?" Mora asked. "Sternal rub," I said, and knuckled the center of his chest. His face grimaced. The monitors did not flinch. His body reacted as if awake. His numbers remained the way numbers are when a person is beyond saving. We pulled the ABG. The respiratory therapist ran it down the hall to the analyzer, shoes squeaking. The echo cart arrived a minute later, a battered machine that has outlived 3 attendings. I gelled the probe and pressed it under his left ribs until the 4 chambers swam into view. Left ventricle, right ventricle, atria floating like small rooms in an old house. In a healthy heart, the left ventricle contracts with purpose, thick muscle squeezing like a hand around a sponge. Here, awake, eyes on me, the walls quivered without rhythm, a failing attempt at motion. The echo printed a picture of silence. It is difficult to describe the thing that isn't happening. Imagine leaning into a seashell and hearing nothing, not even your own blood. Then he sighed. Not a word, just a surrender of air, and his eyelids lowered 0.5 centimeter. The echo changed. The ventricle gathered itself and squeezed. Once, twice. Then steady, obedient contraction, the sponge wrung with efficient strength. On the monitor, the arterial line sprang to life, a sawtooth picket fence marching. The ECG returned to sinus. The cuff read 118/70. He was alive in every way the machines understand. Sedation? Mora said, a note of triumph he didn't mean to show. Maybe he's agitated enough to throw off the readings when awake. Agitation doesn't erase a pulse, I said, but I reached for the propofol anyhow. Habit. In the ICU, we correct what we can control. I dialed a low dose. The drug is a white emulsion that looks like liquid porcelain. We call it the milk of amnesia because it settles people into sleep fast. I explained, as I always do, even to the unconscious. This will help you rest. It is a courtesy the living and the dying both deserve. As the infusion tapped into his vein, the monitors grew cleaner, the numbers more textbook. The RT returned with the ABG slip. PO2 normal. PCO2 normal. Lactate unremarkable. In plain language, his tissues were being oxygenated as if nothing had been wrong at all. Mora shrugged, the gesture of a man placing a problem into a drawer for later. There, see? Equipment. Artifact. We'll keep him sedated until imaging. He was awake, I said, with no pulse. People sit up in a systole all the time on TV, he offered, attempting a joke that landed like a dropped instrument. We'll recheck the system. Replace the module. This hospital's held together with duct tape. I changed the entire monitor anyway. Swapped it for the one in bed 6. Swapped cables. Swapped the power source. Even swapped the pulse ox for the backup that lives in my pocket like a superstition. While he slept. Pristine numbers. When I turned the sedation down and called his name, coaxing his eyelids open, the lines fell flat again, as if some switch inside him flipped with consciousness. This is where I should end with reassurance or a plausible theory. That is what 19 years of protocols have trained me to do, but reassurance is just a blanket you tuck over an open stairwell. It looks neat until someone falls through. I documented everything in my log, times, waveforms, which machine was used and on whom, every swap and outcome, and felt for the first time in my career a cold margin open at the edge of what could be explained. My hand remembered the old nurse's warning. The dead can trick you. My brain cataloged the impossibility and began outlining the only path left to me. We would peel back the layers, one test at a time, until either the world made sense again or I had to accept that the rules were not rules at all. I tightened the arterial line dressing, checked the tape, and called for another set of equipment. Not because I believed it would help, but because Chapter 3 of every real investigation starts the same way. You test the instrument before you admit the music has changed. I started the shift believing that if you follow the steps, swap the cables, flush the lines, confirm with a second machine, the world will stay orderly. By 0110, I was standing over John Doe with 2 monitors, an arterial line, and my own stethoscope pressed so hard to his chest my knuckles ached. And the world was not orderly. First step, replace everything. I stripped the ECG leads from his chest, wiped the skin with alcohol, reapplied new pads, ran the wires to a different bedside monitor. Flatline. I borrowed the monitor from bed 6, one I had used an hour earlier on a sepsis patient who'd shown a perfect rhythm. Flatline. Even the power supply was swapped. Still nothing but the pale green horizon of death. Second step, direct confirmation. The arterial line, the most reliable way we know to measure pressure, showed a dead flat baseline. I flushed it to be sure there wasn't a clot. The waveform should jump with each heartbeat, like the jagged teeth of a saw. Nothing. Yet the man's eyelids tremored when I taped the line. A reflex no corpse should have. Dr. Mora leaned in, knuckled the patient's sternum hard. It's called a sternal rub. painful stimulation to check if someone is really unresponsive. John Doe winced, turned his face away. The screen did not so much as blink. "This can't happen," Maura muttered, the certainty of a man who needs the universe to behave. Brainstems intact. He ran through reflexes quickly. Pupils to light, corneal blink, gag response when we gently touched the back of the throat. All there. For context, brainstem reflexes are primitive but essential. If they're present, some part of the brain is still alive. And yet every machine we owned swore the heart was stone still. By 02 NR, we rolled in the portable X-ray. When the technician fired the beam, a sudden spike of life jumped across the monitors. ECG fluttered, arterial line blipped once, then smoothed back to nothing as John Doe's eyes fluttered open fully. The brief jolt felt like seeing lightning illuminate a ruined city for one heartbeat, then darkness again. Maura swore softly. "Sedate him. If he's fighting the readings. Patients sometimes artifact monitors when they move, but movement can't erase a heartbeat." Still, we reached for the propofol. The moment his lashes lowered, a wave of normalcy swept the room. Sinus rhythm, clean arterial waveform, blood pressure steady. I felt the quiet, traitorous relief of numbers behaving again. I noted it all in my leather log. Asleep, alive. Awake and dead. I underlined it twice, as if repetition could make it rational. I called the charge nurse. She listened, half asleep, then laughed softly. "Old monitors glitch. Keep him sedated till day team." Her dismissal rang in my ear long after she hung up. In the ICU, we trust data because data is supposed to be incorruptible. Tonight, the data lied. I stepped back, stared at the man, this breathing paradox, and felt the first true fissure in my faith. 19 years of night work had taught me that even chaos obeyed some deeper calculus. Now, that calculus was cracking. I looked at his face, serene, almost grateful in sleep, and felt a thin thread of dread coil around my ribs. Whatever was happening wasn't just faulty wires. Something inside him was playing by rules I didn't know. I topped off the sedation, checked the pumps, and told Maura we'd keep testing. We would keep peeling back the layers, because that's what science does. One variable at a time, until the pattern appears. But deep inside, a quiet thought took root. What if there is no pattern to find? When the X-ray tech wheeled out and the room fell silent except for the hiss of ventilators down the hall, I found myself listening. Not for heartbeats, but for something else. Something watching. Something waiting. And as I turned to chart again, the overhead speaker popped once, a sound it makes when connecting a page, but no voice followed. Only static, like breath drawn but not yet released. That's when I knew this night wasn't just an equipment problem. It was a door cracking open, and we had just stepped through. The ICU was at its thinnest around 3 a.m. That is the hour when even fluorescent light feels tired, when the ventilators down the hall sigh like sleepers rolling in bed, and the smell of antiseptic thins into something faintly sweet, almost floral. It's the hour when I usually trust the quiet. That night, the quiet felt staged. John Doe had been sedated for hours, propofol dripping at a rate that should have kept him below dreaming. His monitors were steady. Sinus rhythm, arterial line crisp, numbers calm enough to lull anyone into believing the world still worked. I had almost convinced myself to log it as bizarre artifact and hand the mystery off to day shift. Then his eyes opened. It happened soundlessly, lids peeling back as if tugged by strings. The propofol pump showed no kink, no air bubble. His pupils adjusted to the dim light. The ECG flatlined at the exact instant his gaze met mine. The arterial trace sank to a hard horizon. My first reaction was muscle memory. Check the line, check the leads. But my hands hovered instead, because he mouthed something. Slowly. Precisely. I have gotten good at lip reading over 2 decades of patients behind ventilators. His lips formed, "Help me," not a reflex. Not random, "Help me." I said his name, though we didn't have one, and the sound felt swallowed by the room. I backed a half-step toward the door and called for Maura. The resident arrived, bleary but eager, sleeves shoved up. "What now?" "He's awake. And flat." Maura checked the monitor, frowned, snapped on gloves. "Airway first. If he's not perfusing, he's minutes from brain death even if he looks awake." He reached for the laryngoscope, the curved steel blade we use to expose a patient's vocal cords and guide a breathing tube. For the reader, intubation is life-saving when a patient can't breathe well enough alone. We give medication, open the airway, slide a tube into the trachea. It's routine at 3 a.m., as common to me as tying a shoe. But as Maura slid the blade into John Doe's mouth, the patient's eyes locked on him with an almost human warning. The room's air felt heavier, as if someone had closed a vault. Maura paused mid-motion. His pupils blew wide. He stopped breathing, then he collapsed. The laryngoscope clattered to the floor. Maura's body hit the tiles bonelessly, like a marionette cut free. His monitor, he was wearing one because he'd been setting it up, screamed a flat line. John Doe bolted upright, tearing half the leads from his chest. And when he spoke, it wasn't the ragged whisper of an accident victim. It was Dr. Ethan Maura's voice. "What's happening?" he gasped, clutching at his own, Maura's chest. His face was pure terror, eyes darting between me and the lifeless body on the floor. I stared between the 2 men, the one on the bed alive with Maura's voice, and the shell on the ground pale and slack-jawed. "Ethan?" I whispered before I could stop myself. "Yes," the man on the bed cried. "Don't touch me." "Don't touch him!" The other body, Maura's original, lay in perfect asystole. I should have launched into CPR, chest compressions to keep blood moving, defibrillation if any rhythm returned. Every second counts when the heart stops. Brain cells die fast. But my hands didn't move, because if what I had just seen was true, touching him, trying to save him, might mean becoming him. The respiratory therapist arrived, skidding to a halt. "We need to start compressions." "Wait." My own voice shook, an alien sensation after years of steadiness. The man on the bed, Maura's mind or whatever wore it, kept shaking his head violently. "No, it takes whoever tries." "Takes?" the RT echoed. "He was inside me," the new Maura gasped. "Cold. Slid in the second I touched his airway." Like a switch flipping. I tried to think clinically. Consciousness as an electrical pattern across neurons. For years I've told families that the brain is a signal riding wires, an intricate pattern of current and chemistry. What if that signal could jump, like current leaping from one live line to another the moment contact is made? There is no known mechanism. Biology doesn't work that way. But the room we were standing in wasn't respecting biology. The original body on the floor spasmed once, then stilled. The ECG remained a flat, accusing line. "Call a code?" the RT asked me, voice small. If we called a code, the team would arrive with hands and paddles and compressions. Each pair of hands a new body to steal. "No," I said, and it felt like breaking an oath. Security camera in the corner clicked, a soft repositioning sound. All our cameras are ancient analog, prone to static. Yet I felt the lens shift as if the thing inside the dead shell had turned its gaze outward. The air grew dense, electric with the sense of being watched, though the eyes were lifeless. I tightened my hands into fists to keep from instinctively helping. Years of training screamed to save the man on the floor. Years of survival whispered not to. I did the only thing left. I documented. I wrote in my log, my pen gouging the paper. Resuscitation attempt triggers consciousness migration. Avoid touch. The new Maura, trapped in John Doe's recovering body, sobbed once, then clutched the sheets. "Don't let anyone in," he said. "It wants to live. It wants more." Outside, somewhere down the hall, a crash cart squealed across the tile, the automatic response to a silent alarm. Help was coming. More hands. More hearts. And for the first time in my career, I stood between death and help and thought, I can't let them save him. That was the moment the night shifted from medicine into something predatory. And I knew the next choice I made might decide who woke up wearing whose life. The crash cart's squeal grew louder until it filled the ICU hall like an approaching storm. Normally that sound means relief, reinforcements, a code team bringing skill and adrenaline. That night it sounded like bait being drawn to a trap. I stepped into the doorway and waved my arms before the cart could enter. "Stop!" I barked, sharper than I've ever spoken in a hospital. 3 people froze, a sleepy charge nurse, a respiratory therapist from another floor, and a tech pushing the cart. "Dr. Mora's down?" the charge nurse asked, glancing past me. "Do not touch him." My voice was steel. "Back out, now!" They stared. Medicine teaches you that a stopped heart is an invitation to act. My order violated the deepest training we have. "Reid." The charge started. "Something's wrong with this case," I cut in. "Hands off until I say." I slammed the door and locked it. The sound was foreign, a nurse locking herself away from help. Inside, the man in the bed, Mora's mind inside John Doe's body, panted through the oxygen mask I'd hastily applied. The other body, Mora's former shell, lay motionless on the floor, monitor screaming a systole. The thing that had ridden him was somewhere behind those still eyes. I grabbed the room phone, thumbed the switch to call the attending. Static swallowed the line. I tried my cell. Dead the moment I stepped closer to the body on the floor. When I backed to the doorway, a single bar returned. Forward, no signal. Back, weak signal. It was as if the air around the corpse ate communication. "It doesn't like connection," I muttered without meaning to. Mora, or the mind wearing him, lifted his head. "It's smart enough to cut what can bring help. But it's instinct, too. Survival. It moves into whoever tries to save the host." My brain searched for foothold. Survival instinct. Parasitic. But not virus, not prion. Not anything we understand. Just signal, like a software that copies itself the moment someone hits restore. I remembered every training mantra. Never stop compressions. Always protect airway first. Protocol is meant to protect life. Now protocol was bait. The lights overhead dimmed a shade, just enough to notice. Old hospital wiring, probably. Yet the monitors rebooted themselves, screens blacking and flickering green again. For a heartbeat, both sets of vitals lit alive. 2 rhythmic picket fences, 2 healthy pressures, for the body on the bed and the one on the floor. Then the floor body's line fell flat again, and the beds continued, though I knew that heart now beat for Mora's stolen consciousness. It wanted me to see that. My pulse hammered. If I acted, if I so much as pressed 2 fingers to that still chest, would it jump again? Would I become a hollow shell before I could scream? I found my gaze drifting to the crash cart's defibrillator. Defib is ritual. Shock the heart back into organized rhythm. But you must touch, you must try to save. Every fiber of my training screamed to prove this was still just electricity. The entity, or what wore Mora's face now, whispered through the oxygen mask. "It only lives if you try to save. Don't." His voice trembled, but the words were steady. I looked at the lifeless original body. Ending its viability would end the loop, cut off the host. The thought came clinical and cold, euthanized to contain. But there was still a man's face there. Still a chance I was wrong. To kill is to cross a line you don't come back from. I hovered over the defibrillator pads, fingers trembling. Prove it, the rationalist in me said. Science demands data, but something deeper, older, screamed, don't give it the bridge. In the end, fear won, or perhaps survival. I shut the defibrillator off and shoved the cart back to the door. I moved instead to the propofol pump on the bed and another on the cart. Sedation. Not life-saving, just life-silencing. I drew up enough to quiet any possible host. First the body on the bed, the one that now held Mora's consciousness, until his eyes slid closed, and the lines stayed steady, but slow. Then, with shaking hands, I started a drip into the corpse on the floor, not because it was alive, but because something inside might be. I disconnected every line that could deliver shock, oxygen, or compression. I tied my own wrists loosely with gauze to the side rail, an act so no reflex or panic could make me perform a rescue. Then I waited. The hours until dawn stretched elastic. The only sounds were ventilators down the hall and my own heartbeat. Once, the monitors blipped. Not a beat, just a flicker like static. Once, the overhead speaker hissed a single breath of sound and died. When first light seeped through the slatted blinds, the world felt paper thin. The day team arrived to a locked room. I untied myself, unlocked the door, and said flatly, "Both expired overnight. Logs wiped." I knew even as I spoke that the recorders on the monitors showed only blanks now. They looked at me with confusion and a little suspicion. To them, it would look like two ordinary deaths and a night nurse rattled by stress. But I knew better. I had felt something watching every second I resisted the impulse to save. I left the room that morning certain of only one thing. There are forces that crave our instinct to preserve life, and if we feed them, they will take more than the heartbeat we're trying to return. And I also knew the battle wasn't finished, because as I passed the supply closet, the crash cart I'd shoved away rolled out an inch on its own and stopped, as if nudged by a breath I couldn't hear. Didn't stop walking. I couldn't, because the next chapter wasn't about medicine anymore. It was about surviving what medicine had called into the room. Wrote the incident note the way I have always documented. Clearly, clinically, with timestamps and objective language. 23:41. Patient admitted, unconscious, normal vitals. 23:52. Patient awakened. Vitals absent despite responsiveness. 02:15. Intubation attempt by Dr. Mora. Subsequent collapse, asystole. Resuscitation deferred due to anomalous risk of consciousness transfer. Even typing those words felt like setting fire to my own credibility. But I wrote them anyway, because to omit them would be a lie. When the attending and administrators arrived that morning, I gave my report. Their faces moved through disbelief, irritation, then quiet pity. "Equipment failure," one said. "Monitor malfunction under stress." Another suggested I'd suffered trauma-induced misperception, a polite phrase for you panicked and imagined things. They pulled the monitor logs. The screens showed nothing but normal startup sequences and blank periods where the anomalies had lived. My handwritten notes, they implied, were helpful but subjective. Dr. Mora's body went to the morgue, listed as unexpected code death, presumed cardiac cause. John Doe, the original host, became simply expired on arrival. I sat through the incident review hearing numb. No one asked the question that screamed inside me. If he was dead, how did he take someone else's life? Because that question cannot be charted. It can only ruin careers. I handed in my badge 3 days later. 19 years of nights, ended with a single key drop at the security desk. "Are you sure?" the guard asked, scanning the ID. "I'm sure." My voice didn't shake. Home felt alien after so long on night schedule. The first evenings I stayed up by reflex, listening to my own house breathe, refrigerator hum, distant traffic. Yet there was something else beneath the familiar sounds. a presence like the quiet just before a monitor alarm. I started waking at 02:15, the hour my ICU coffee ritual once lived. Each time I swore I felt eyes on me. The corner near the bedroom door seemed darker than it should be, shaped vaguely like a hospital bed rail. Once, half asleep, I heard the squeak of cartwheels on tile. So distinct I almost rose to check the hall before remembering I don't live in a hospital anymore. I told myself it was stress, nightmares, burnout. But deep down, I know it isn't just that. Whatever moved from John Doe into Mora didn't die when I refused to rescue. It lingered, hungry, patient, waiting for another act of saving to open a door. I haven't touched a patient since that night. I can't. My hands, once steady enough to thread lines in a coding heart, stay curled in my lap. Because to reach out, to press down on a still chest, might be to invite it in. And in the small hours, when the world is thin and machines hum in distant rooms, I feel it watching. Quiet, calculating, waiting for the next rescuer who believes that saving a life can never cost your own.